We stand our ground.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Hearts of Iron 4 dev diary. Today we're going to cover the long-awaited Turkish focus tree, but before we do that there's two important pieces of information to cover first. Namely, we do now know the DLC's name, Battle for the Bosporus, although we did kind of figure it out in the previous video last week. The other, far more important piece of information is we also got the date of release from their Steam preview page for the DLC. The 15th of October. From the time of making this video, that's less than a month away, so it's pretty imminent. In total, we know that 3 countries are going to be getting new focus trees. That's Turkey, Bulgaria and Greece, as well as some other features including new models, music, and all the other stuff that will come up in the next few dev diaries. But without further ado, let's just go straight into talking about Turkey. So famously, Turkey was neutral throughout World War II, itself being relatively new to the world stage. I mean, it only gained its independence from the previous turmoil in 1923, when the Kemalists rose up in their own revolutionary war. It was that leader, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, as seen here, who is called the father of the Turks, and will lead your country from the 1936 start date. Most of the game seems to revolve around him, his policies, and what you can achieve with that. Being the father of the Turks gives him some quite extraordinarily amazing buffs. Stability, everything's cheaper, including a national spirit which reveres the legacy of Atatürk. His ideology of Kemalism is really the crux of the entire tree. But that's not to say that Turkey has everything perfect. There are 4 very problematic modifiers you will have in your country at the start date. The first one isn't even a national spirit, but an industrial concern. One of the research buffs you get in the bottom usually gives you either industrial research speed or electronic research speed, but instead you are forced to have the Debt Council. You cannot remove this, and it does give you reduced political power, your resources are all gone, and your consumer goods are more used. Not a good thing to have, but not quite as debilitating as Greece. In terms of standard national spirit, you have a disorganised army, which essentially means that your army is very slow to achieve anything. Kemalist officers, which means your officers are good, but they're not going to get as much better, to be honest. And sectarian woes, which is probably the most damning, giving you a massive stability and war support drop, as well as the internal problems that come with the key factions fighting over regions across your country. Speaking of regions, the entire map has been completely shook up, as we have seen in this image here. In total, Turkey has had a complete state rework, adding in 3 more states than prior. It used to have 18, it has 21 now. The most notable being the Istanbul Strait, which is its own much smaller state compared to the Edirne, which it used to be connected to. Some things they don't talk about here, but are obviously worth mentioning, is in Syria, the small state of Hatay has been released so that some historical shiftovers can happen there, and over in Bulgaria it's now got the state of Moesia, which all used to be Plovdiv. So Bulgaria now has 4 states where it used to have just 3. And if you're going to be very pedantic, you also might notice that Thrace now is 1 province smaller. It's a much smaller Thrace. I think they wanted some really good borders with this one. Right, back to Turkey. So those sectarian woes we were talking about earlier seem to come up across all of your individual states. These come across as state modifiers, as seen here with Kurdish separatism. At the start of the game, the 4 states that make up the Kurdish part of Turkey are not actually Kurd, and this state modifier is going to raise the resistance, as added in the resistance, to make it so that eventually they might rebel and form their own independent state. Using decisions, national focuses, and whatever means you can, you need to either push this separatism down, or you need to integrate them into part of Turkey. This is one of the key parts dividing your country at the start. The next group are the traditionalists, who live in the more rural parts of Turkey, and seek to unite the state and the church, that being the Islamic Church, and form a more theocratic state potentially. Long story short, they're not a fan of Atatürk, and they will completely remove all ability to build anything in those states. The final state modifier we were shown was Kemalist loyalties, which technically isn't a modifier for negative, it gives you a buff to recruitable population and construction speed. But this is because you start the game as a camelist. If you choose to go down your own path, maybe the traditionalist route or maybe something else, this might turn into a negative modifier, so all of your urban city regions suddenly aren't so good as they used to be. To my mind, this system is even better than the faction system we saw with Greece and Bulgaria. It's a very, very noticeable way to integrate factions into states, and I think it works much better with the pre-existing mechanics of state modifiers. I feel like factions would work better if there was a dedicated interface to interact with them, while this one is far more simple and thus far more approachable. Now, finally moving on to the focus tree, the thing I think you all want to see. The focus tree will have 197 focuses, which is more than France but less than Spain. I think it's the second highest amount of focuses in the game. The tree is split up into 4 key parts as they've self-represented here. You start off at the start of the game wanting to get your own internal politics correct with your own political focuses. This is less about ideologies as a unique concept, but moulding the Camelist ideology to be more in favour with the ideology you want to align to. After that, you can move down to your foreign policy and seek to make friends and enemies with other countries. This is also where you'll get your war goals. You have your armed forces path in the top right, which is your standard military focuses. And at the bottom, the national oath focuses, which in honestly, I'm not quite sure what they do yet. We'll cover them later. So starting with your own internal politics, in 1936 you have to decide what kind of Camelism you want to go with. They very neatly showed us the options you have are democratic, neutral, non-aligned left-wing and right-wing, some fascism and some communism. And these are all quite interchangeable and malleable. You can actually go for more than one. They're not exclusive paths too much. There is, though, a very distinct left and right side, and I think that's illustrated at the top, so your initial choice is the most important one. You might also notice that your industry tree is quite small. They say this is because most of your industry comes from decisions. We haven't really seen how this works, so I can't tell you whether that's good or not. We'll have to find out for ourselves. So the first focus in the tree involves the Istanbul Strait, which is demilitarized after the First World War Ottoman treaties. Your job is to demilitarize it, and there is the problem that if you click the wrong thing, the Soviet Union might go to war with you. So good luck making sure you don't die from the first focus. Assuming you didn't die from the first focus, you'll have to move on to decide whether you're going more left-wing or right-wing for your economic policy. We see here that if you go for a more right-wing on the Etaticism approach, Etaticism? Don't quote me on how to say these things, you can get a very strong buff for your consumer goods and construction speeds. However, you can't change your economy law. It says here if we advance our economy law, then we should be prepared for some friction, although I'm not quite sure what that friction could be, but I do feel like it's going to be a massive economic collapse. The echoes of 2008 can be heard. As you progress through this focus tree, you may find that eventually Mustafa Kemal Ataturk will pass away, and it's up to you to choose the successor, which largely depends down which path you go. Here we can see 6 portraits depending on sort of which path you go down. Ismet Ayanu, who's the traditional historical candidate. There's Fevzi Kakmak. He's the more general dictatory-esque character, who they compare to the option to have as a Francisco Franco-like dictator. We have the fascist and communist leaders here with Recep Peker and Sevket Surya Ayadema. In truth, I would not ask you to judge me on my inability to speak Turkish. It's terrible, I know. And the Democrats, both left and right wing, depending on if they're battling for the Kemalists or they're pitching for the Conservatives. Once you've got your new leader and all things are in place, you're ready to begin your own game with foreign affairs. And there seems to be 5 key paths divided down 3 key sections to go for. Let's start off with the foreign policy branch. The foreign policy branch is the historical version where Turkey doesn't have to join a war all the way up till 1945, and mostly spends their game just making favours with other countries to build themselves up to the position where they could go to war if they wanted to. In this image we can see 2 of the potential favours you can get, the one on the left being the United States unconditionally grants the concession. this being the Chester concession, which gives you some sieves and some oil and some excavation technologies. This is the more allied route. On the right, we can see you've got some commanders there, Hans von Luck and Wilhelm Ritter von Thoma. These are Germans, so this is if you're going down the Axis path, you can integrate some German generals into your own army. Each path you can go down, they're not mutually exclusive, so you can actually balance both and get the best of both worlds before you commit to joining a singular faction. Once you do join a faction, you can see there are plenty of interesting options to go down that are slightly more ahistorical. These include securing Iran with the Allies, carving up Greece in your own Mediterranean entente, typically joining the Axis and trying to secure the oil in Iraq, or forming the Golden Square coup. You can support your own anti-Bolshevik Mediterranean communist bloc, or joining with Stalin and helping him in his plight to make the larger Soviet bloc. It's all up to you. If you, however, do not wish to join with anyone and stand to make your own future, you can continue to prioritise the Balkan integrity. This is effectively a path that allows you to get the allies of Yugoslavia, Greece and Romania to form a much stronger solidified Balkans and form their own entente. This allows you to also give each of the countries buffs, those being your allies and yourself, to buff you all up to stand against any foreign imperial forces. At the bottom of the tree, it also does give you some war possibilities. You can either attack Bulgaria or integrate them, or you can go to war with Italy and the Soviet Union. It's all up to you. The final foreign policy path is the pivot to the past, which is, I'm pretty sure, the one we all expected, restoring the Ottoman Empire, or as they call it, the Ottoman Sultanate. I would say this is your pretty standard ahistorical traditional history path. It feels very similar to the Austro-Hungary path. You start off by trying to get them in power, you get your leader, and then you get the Sultan, who is a gentle scholar. He's not quite the warmonger people made him out to be, I suppose, or what you would assume from an Ottoman Sultan, but that's quite alright, because his friends will help you out with that, and you can conquer to your heart's content. And if you are going to conquer as the Ottoman Sultanate, typically that would mean you're heading towards the Middle East, which is known for its sand, and I hate sand. It's coarse, rough, and it gets everywhere. So they have added a new unit for anybody who owns territory in the Middle East, that being camels. It's a camel. What more do I need to say? It works effectively the same way as cavalry do, except it's got more buffs for being in desertous terrain, and heavy debuffs for not being there. But who cares? It's a camel. And the last thing to cover is this final nationalist oath path. In truth, I wasn't 100% sure what I was looking at. I had to Google through what most of these things are. But the best comparison I think I can make is it's similar to the Mexican focus tree, where at the bottom they get a collection of war goals. In total, it appears to be expanding upon Turkey's national presence, including going to war with Bulgaria, Cyprus and Greece on the left. Then you've got the Soviet Union and trying to get back the Caucasian territories, I think. On the right there, that's definitely going to war with Iraq and then the Kurdish part of what I think could be Iran. Then you've got the Turanist ambition, which completely confuses me because it gives you the ability to go to war with China and subdue the Magyars, which would be Hungary, before crowning yourselves the Finn-Ugur, which to my mind is the collection of countries that maintain the languages of the Finn-Ugur people, those being Hungary, Finland and Estonia. So is Turkey going to war with Finland in the end? Or are you uniting yourself with Finland? I think only time will tell, but this bottom tree could be open up to some pretty crazy old history. Okay, and that's everything. That's the focus tree. It should be coming out in a month, so I look forward to it. I hope you're looking forward to it. There's still going to be some news to cover. There's still some things that can be added to the tree, so we'll see what they are. If you enjoyed, thank you very much for watching. Feel free to like, feel free to subscribe. I'll see you all then. Bye.